Kayla knew she was going to die. As she pressed her slender body against the ancient temple wall, the luminescent vines pulsating softly around her, she could hear the heavy metallic footsteps approaching. Every story her people had told for generations was about to culminate in her final moments. The Star Eaters had found her. The stories described humans as merciless destroyers who consumed everything in their path. Resources, cultures, even people. They will devour your essence, the elders warned, leaving nothing but emptiness. Kaelin had always wondered if these tales were exaggerated to frighten young Xylars into obedience. Now, with the human soldier's shadow looming larger against the broken stone archway, she realized the stories might have been understated. Kaelin's violet skin rippled with fear patterns, an involuntary response she couldn't control. The shallow cut on her arm stung, a reminder of her narrow escape when the Terran forces had raided the sacred forest. She'd become separated from her gathering party during the chaos, and now found herself cornered in the ruins of an ancient Xylar temple, surrounded by the glowing tendrils of luminary vines that seemed to reach toward her in sympathy. The human appeared in the archway, bulky in combat armor smeared with mud and forest debris. The weapon in their hands was pointed directly at her. Even through the helmet's opaque visor, Kaelin could feel the soldier's gaze fixing on her. The alien, the other, the enemy. There was nowhere to run. The temple ruins ended at a sheer cliff drop behind her. The human blocked the only exit. Kaelin closed her eyes, her four-fingered hands trembling as she prepared for pain and darkness. She waited for the Star Eater to consume her, just as the stories had promised. Instead, she heard a weary sigh and the clatter of metal against stone. Kaelin's eyes flew open involuntarily. The human soldier had slumped down against the opposite wall, weapons set aside, but still within reach. With slow, deliberate movements that seemed designed not to startle her, the soldier reached up and removed their helmet. The face revealed was unexpectedly young. A male human, Kaelin thought, though her knowledge of human gender differences was limited to clandestine educational simulations she'd accessed against the Elder's wishes. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, and his eyes, a striking blue that reminded Kaelin of the rare frost blooms that appeared during Viridia Prime's short winter, looked exhausted but held no malice. "Longest damn day in the history of long days," the human muttered, running a hand through short, sweat-dampened hair. Kaelin remained frozen, unsure what to make of this development. Was this some kind of pre-consumption ritual? A form of psychological torture? The human seemed to notice her confusion and perhaps her fear. He raised his empty hand slowly. "Not going to hurt you," he said in Common Galactic, his accent thick but understandable from Kaelin's secret language studies. "Just need rest. Minute." He reached into a pouch at his belt, movements deliberately slow, and pulled out a self-heating food packet and a water filtration bottle. He placed both items on the ground between them, then nudged the food packet toward her with a booted foot. "You look hungrier than me," he said with a one-shouldered shrug. "I hate this stuff anyway." Kaelin stared at the offered food, then at the human soldier, completely baffled by this unexpected turn of events. Everything she'd been taught about humans, about the Star Eaters, was being contradicted by this simple act of, what, kindness? Or was it a trap of some kind? The human seemed to read her suspicion and gave a short, tired laugh. "It's not poisoned. If I want to kill you, why would I waste good rations?" He opened his own water bottle and took a demonstrative sip. "The name's Sergeant Reese, by the way. Not that it matters much out here." Kaelin remained silent, still pressed against the wall, her skin now shifting from fear patterns to confusion patterns, subtle waves of lighter purple moving across her normally deep violet skin. Reese noticed the color change. "That's pretty neat," he said, pointing vaguely at her arm. "Can all your people do that?" The casual question, so at odds with what should have been a deadly encounter, finally broke through Kaelin's paralysis. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the Common Galactic feeling strange on her tongue. "All Xylar communicate this way." Reese nodded, as if this was the most normal conversation in the world. "Cool. Wish I could do that. Would make poker night a lot more interesting." When Kaelin didn't respond, he added, That's a card game. Not important. He took another sip of water, then gestured to the food packet again. Seriously, take it. It's some kind of synthetic protein with vegetable matter. Tastes like the inside of a boot, but it's got nutrients. I cannot eat that, Kalen said carefully. Our digestive systems. Right. Reese interrupted, slapping his forehead. Of course. Stupid of me. He dug deeper into his pouch and produced a small energy bar with a fruit-like scent. How about this? It's basically just sugars and fiber. Might be more compatible. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on Kalen. She was supposed to be dead, consumed by a Star Eater. Instead, the Star Eater was offering her food. Either every story she'd been told was wrong, or this human was unlike any other. Why are you being kind? She finally asked. Reese looked genuinely surprised by the question. Kind? This isn't kindness, it's basic decency. Just because our leaders are fighting over resources doesn't mean we have to be savages about it. He paused, studying her. Is that what you think of us? That we're monsters? Before Kalen could respond, a mechanical whirring sound overhead made them both tense. Reese quickly grabbed his helmet and pulled it back on, listening to something through his internal comms. Patrol drone, he whispered. And it's not alone. There's something else moving out there. Either more of my people or some of those six-legged predators I ran into earlier. Neither is good news for us right now. Kalen's attention caught on the word us, as if they were somehow together in this situation rather than natural enemies. A rustling sound from the temple entrance confirmed the human's warning. Something was approaching. Reese glanced toward Kalen, his expression now hidden behind his visor. Look, I don't know what you've heard about humans, but I'm not interested in hurting anyone, especially not civilians. I'm just trying to get back to my rendezvous point. He hesitated, then added, those injuries look minor, but you won't make it far alone with patrols and predators out there. I think we might both have better odds if we stick together. Temporarily. Kalen couldn't believe what she was hearing. A human soldier proposing an alliance? It defied everything she knew. Yet as the sounds outside grew closer and the patrol drone made another pass overhead, she realized she had little choice. Her wound wasn't serious, but it would slow her return to the village, and she didn't know the location of the Terran patrols. Until we reach safety, she agreed hesitantly. Reese nodded. I'll get you as close to your people as I can without getting shot, and then we part ways. Deal. The strange partnership was sealed with a nod, just as the drone's searchlight swept across the temple entrance. Reese quickly gathered his supplies and gestured toward a narrow passageway at the back of the temple that Kalen hadn't noticed before. There's a way down the cliff face through there, he whispered. I scouted it earlier. Ready. Kalen took one last look at the temple entrance, then at the human soldier who had spared her life and offered help instead of harm. With a deep breath, she nodded and followed him into the darkness, away from everything she thought she knew about humans, and into a future suddenly full of uncertainty. The passageway was narrow and treacherous, lit only by patches of bioluminescent fungi and the occasional shaft of moonlight through cracks in the ancient stone. Reese led the way, his armor occasionally scraping against the tight turns with metallic protests that made Kalen wince. Sorry, he whispered after a particularly loud screech. This suit wasn't designed for spelunking, more for look intimidating and stop bullets than gracefully navigate ancient alien temples. Despite herself, Kalen felt the edges of her mouth curl upward, a smile, though not one a human would recognize as such. The soldier's self-deprecating humor was so at odds with the merciless image of the Star Eaters that it continued to erode her preconceptions. They emerged at the base of the cliff as Viridia Prime's smaller moon was rising, casting a pale golden light over the dense forest. Reese consulted a device on his forearm, which projected a small holographic map. My rendezvous point is about 20 clicks northeast, he said, pointing. Your settlement is southwest. Kalen supplied cautiously, not wanting to reveal too much about her people's location. Near the Great River confluence. Reese nodded, respecting her vagueness. We'll need to cross some difficult terrain, then. There's a Terran patrol route here. He indicated a line on his map, and a surveillance hub here. We'll need to avoid both. Kalen studied the map, then gestured to an area Reese had marked as unknown terrain. That is the gray marshes. The gases are toxic to both our species without protection, but I know safe passages through. Reese raised an eyebrow. You'd share that knowledge? With one the enemy. Kalen's skin rippled with decision patterns, concentric circles of lighter color. You shared your food and your map. We have agreed to help each other. Survive. Fair enough, Reese said with a small smile. Lead on, then. As they moved through the forest, Kalen found herself repeatedly surprised by her human companion. He moved with unexpected care, avoiding stepping on delicate plant life when possible. When Kalen stopped to listen to a warning from a cluster of sensor plants, their delicate tendrils vibrating with information about nearby predators, Reese waited patiently instead of dismissing her actions as primitive superstition. The plants, she explained after guiding them on a slight detour, they speak of a hunter nearby, six-legged, with thermal sensing organs. It is drawn to technological energy signatures. That'll be a hexatherm, Reese said with a grimace. Ran into one earlier today. Nasty piece of work. Nearly got through my armor at the joints. He tapped a sequence on his forearm unit. I'll put my suit in passive mode. Minimizes the energy signature, though it means no enhanced strength or jump assist. You understand our ecosystem? Kalen asked, surprised. Reese shrugged. Basic training included xenobiology of Iridia Prime. Know your battlefield and all that. Though between you and me, they left out the part about the plants being able to talk. They don't talk as you and I do, Kalen clarified. They sense, feel, remember, share. My people have learned to interpret these things. Like Grandma Ellie's garden back home, Reese mused. She always claimed her tomatoes grew better when she sang to them. Guess she was onto something, just a few centuries and light years behind you folks. They walked in silence for a while, Kalen occasionally stopping to commune with the plants, Reese occasionally checking his scanner for patrol activity. It was a strange partnership, but it worked, their skills complementing each other in ways neither could have anticipated. As the night deepened, they reached the edge of the gray marshes. In the darkness, the bubbling pools glowed with an eerie blue-green light, beautiful but deadly. The gases affect the nervous system first, Kalen explained. Confusion, then paralysis. Sounds delightful, Reese muttered. I have a rebreather in my kit, but it's only good for about 30 minutes. The safe path will take longer than that, Kalen said. But there are air pockets, places where the winds from the mountains push the gases away. We can rest there. Reese looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. I'm trusting you with my life here. Just so we're clear, Kalen's skin rippled with solemn agreement patterns. And I am trusting you with mine. The journey through the marshes was tense. Kalen led them along ridges and narrow solid paths that twisted between the bubbling pools. Twice they had to backtrack when the path ahead had collapsed since Kalen's last journey through the area. Reese, despite his bulky armor, followed her instructions precisely, never questioning her judgment even when the route seemed counterintuitive. When they reached the first air pocket, a small rocky outcropping where mountain winds created a natural clearing in the toxic gases, Reese removed his helmet and took deep, grateful breaths. That's some impressive navigation, he said, sitting down heavily on a boulder. I'd have been marsh food 10 minutes in without you. And I would have been captured or killed by your patrols without your technology, Kalen acknowledged, settling across from him. As they rested, Reese pulled out the energy bar he'd offered earlier and held it out again. You should eat something. Still a long way to go. This time, Kalen accepted. Her people could process the simple sugars and plant fibers, though the artificial flavoring tasted strange on her tongue. As she ate, Reese asked questions about her people, not strategic information that could be used against them, but cultural questions. He wanted to know about their connection to the plants, about their art, about their stories. In return, Kalen found herself asking about Earth and the Terran colonies. Reese spoke of diverse landscapes and cities that sounded impossible, structures that reached into the clouds, underground transport systems, vast bodies of water that stretched beyond the horizon. Why did you become a soldier? Kalen eventually asked. Reese was quiet for a moment. Not many other options where I'm from. Poor district, underfunded schools. Military service meant education, housing, healthcare. He shrugged. Didn't expect to end up fighting a resource war on a distant planet. Thought I'd serve my term, get my benefits, go home, and start a real life. You did not come to conquer. Me personally? No. Reese looked out over the glowing marshes. Though I can't speak for the higher-ups. There's always someone looking to profit from other people's suffering. He glanced at her. What about you? What did you do before I crashed into your life and ruined your day? I am a forest harmonizer, Kaylin said, the common. Galactic words feeling inadequate for her role. I help maintain the balance between our settlements and the natural systems. I listen to the plants, advocate for their needs, and help them adapt to our presence. An environmental engineer, Reese translated. Or maybe a diplomat for the plant kingdom. That's cool. Their rest was interrupted by a distant sound, the unmistakable whine of a Terran transport ship. Reese was on his feet instantly, helmet back on, scanner active. Night patrol, he said tersely. Not heading this way yet, but we should move. There's a gap in our sensor coverage here, but it won't last long. They continued their journey through the marshes, moving more quickly now despite the danger. By the time they reached the far side, dawn was approaching, painting Viridia Prime sky with strokes of amber and rose. The terrain beyond the marshes was less hazardous but more exposed. Rolling hills covered with knee-high silver grass that offered little concealment. Reese took the lead here, using his scanner to plot the safest route between patrol zones. We should reach the forest again before the sun is fully up, he said. Better cover there. As they crested a hill, Kaylin stumbled, her injured arm throbbing. Reese caught her before she could fall, his armored gauntlet surprisingly gentle on her uninjured arm. Let me take a look at that, he said, concerned. It might be infected. Kaylin allowed him to examine the cut, which had indeed begun to show signs of infection, the edges turning a darker purple than her normal skin tone. I have basic medical supplies, Reese offered, already reaching for a compartment in his armor. No need, Kaylin said. She knelt and placed her hand on a patch of small white flowers growing among the silvergrass. Closing her eyes, she communed with the plants, her skin glowing faintly as she did so. When she opened her eyes, she carefully plucked several leaves and flowers, crushed them between her palms, and applied the resulting paste to her wound. Reese watched in fascination. Medicinal plants? Yes. They offer their healing properties willingly. She covered the wound with a broad leaf that adhered naturally to her skin. It will be better soon. That's incredible, Reese said quietly. We have so much technology, and yet we've lost that kind of connection to our world. Their moment of reflection was cut short by the sound of something large moving through the grass behind them. Without a word, they both dropped low, Reese's hand moving instinctively to his weapon. Through the swaying grass, they glimpsed the hexatherm predator Kaylin had sensed earlier, all 6 muscular limbs and thermal sensing organs swiveling in search of prey. It was heading directly toward them, following either their heat signatures or the energy emissions from Reese's armor, despite its passive mode. It's locked onto us, Reese whispered. Running isn't an option. Those things can outpace a transport at full sprint. Kaylin's mind raced. The hexatherm's primary weakness was its over-reliance on thermal sensing. Its actual vision was poor, especially in daylight. I have an idea, she whispered. Can you create heat somewhere else? A distraction? Reese nodded, understanding immediately. He detached a small device from his belt. Emergency flare. It'll burn hot for about 2 minutes. He looked around. Where? Kaylin pointed to a depression in the ground about 50 meters to their right. There. When it moves toward the heat, we go the opposite way. Stay low in the grass. Reese armed the flare and, with a practice motion, sent it sailing through the air to land precisely where Kaylin had indicated. The device activated on impact, generating intense heat without much visible light. The effect on the hexatherm was immediate. Its thermal sensors swiveled toward the new, stronger heat source, and it changed course, loping toward the flare with predatory focus. Now, Reese whispered, and they began crawling through the grass in the opposite direction, moving as quietly as possible. They had almost reached the crest of the next hill when disaster struck. Reese's armor, despite being in passive mode, caught on a hidden rock, producing a metallic scrape that seemed deafening in the tense silence. The hexatherm froze, then whirled toward the sound, abandoning the now cooling flare. With a roar that sounded like grinding metal, it charged toward them. "Run!" Reese shouted, abandoning stealth. He switched his armor to active mode, the power systems humming to life. "Get to the forest." Kalen sprinted toward the tree line, now visible in the growing light. Reese followed, but deliberately lagged behind, placing himself between her and the charging predator. She heard him fire several shots, which seemed to only enrage the beast further. Looking back, Kalen saw the hexatherm leap. Reese attempted to dodge, but one of the creature's claws caught his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. The predator pounced, its massive weight pinning the human down. Without thinking, Kalen stopped and turned back. The plants in this area were sparse, but she reached out to them desperately, calling for help in the way only her people could. The silver grass responded, suddenly growing and thickening around the hexatherm's legs, entangling it just enough to slow its attack. Kalen ran back to Reese, who was struggling to keep the creature's snapping jaws away from his helmet. She grabbed a handful of seeds from a nearby plant. Seeds she knew contained compounds that affected neural systems. With all her strength, she hurled them directly at the hexatherm's thermal sensing organs. The seeds burst on contact, releasing a cloud of powerful neurodisruptive pollen. The effect wasn't immediate, but after several harrowing seconds, the creature's movements became erratic, then sluggish. It staggered off of Reese, shaking its massive head in confusion. Kalen helped Reese to his feet. His armor was damaged, but had protected him from serious injury. Together, they limped toward the forest as the hexatherm, still disoriented from the pollen, wandered in circles behind them. Once they reached the safety of the trees, Reese leaned against a trunk, breathing heavily. "You came back for me," he said, his voice a mixture of pain and wonder. "Yes," Kalen replied simply, inspecting the damage to his armor. "Why? I'm one of the Star Eaters, aren't I?" There was no bitterness in his voice, only genuine curiosity. Kalen's skin rippled with patterns that had no equivalent in human expression, a complex mixture of certainty and revelation. "No," she said finally. "You are Reese." Something shifted between them in that moment, a barrier falling, a truth acknowledged. They weren't just two strangers forced together by circumstance anymore. They had saved each other. They had seen each other. Reese removed his damaged helmet, his face pale but determined. "We should keep moving. That thing will recover eventually, and the commotion might attract attention." They continued through the forest, moving more slowly now due to Reese's injury. Kalen found healing plants along the way, applying their remedies to his bruises and cuts. In return, he shared the last of his water and rations. As the day wore on, they exchanged more stories. Reese spoke of his family back on Earth, his grandmother who talked to plants, his younger sister studying to become a doctor against all financial odds. Kalen told him about Xyler traditions, the great harmonizing where thousands of her people would commune with the forest simultaneously, creating patterns of light and color visible from orbit. She shared legends not about fearsome humans, but about ancient forest spirits and the first days of their civilization. "Your people don't sound so different from mine at the core," Reese observed as they rested beside a small stream. "Family, community, stories to explain the world around us." Perhaps the differences were exaggerated, Kalen admitted, to make the conflict easier to accept. "Tale as old as time," Reese sighed. "Dehumanize the enemy, or de-Xylerize, in your case." They shared a moment of understanding before continuing their journey. By late afternoon, they were approaching the edge of the forest. Beyond lay another stretch of open ground, and beyond that, the rendezvous point Reese was aiming for. "My scanner shows it's clear," Reese said, studying his device. "No patrol activity. Unusual for this time of day." Kalen reached out to the plants around them, sensing their mood. The forest is quiet, tense. Something is wrong. Reese frowned. Let's approach carefully. There's a ridge over there that should give us a view without exposing us. They made their way to the ridge and lay flat against the ground, peering cautiously over the top. In the valley below, they could see a small Terran outpost, temporary structures, a landing pad, communication equipment. But something was off. Those aren't standard Terran military markings, Reese whispered, pointing to a transport ship. Those are Blackridge insignia. Mercenaries. Mercenaries? Kalen asked. Private military contractors. Not officially part of our forces, but sometimes hired for. Operations that command wants deniability for. His expression darkened. They're bad news. No rules of engagement, no oversight. As they watched, a group of armored figures emerged from one of the structures, dragging what appeared to be a Terran soldier in a damaged uniform. They're our own people, Reese whispered in horror. They've captured our own soldiers. The mercenaries forced the captive to his knees. One of them, clearly a leader from his stance and the deference others showed him, began interrogating the soldier, though they were too far away to hear the exchange. We need to get closer, Reese said grimly. Something very wrong is happening here. They circled around, using the forest edge as cover, until they were close enough to hear snatches of conversation. They concealed themselves in a dense thicket just within earshot of the outpost. Don't care about your orders, Lieutenant, the mercenary leader was saying. Your commanders contracted us to deliver results, not excuses. Those weren't the orders, the captured Terran officer insisted. We were told to secure resources, not eliminate settlements. There are civilians. A brutal blow cut off his words. Civilians, soldiers, makes no difference. The Xyler won't negotiate, so they'll be removed. Made an example of. The mercenary gestured to a holographic map showing a Xyler settlement, one that Kalen recognized with a jolt of horror as an outpost not far from her own village. We hit this one tomorrow at dawn, the mercenary continued. When the others see what happens to those who resist, they'll be more reasonable about the mining rights. That's genocide, the Terran officer spat. Command would never authorize. Command will see the results and look the other way. The mercenary interrupted coldly. That's what they always do. And anyone with inconvenient principles, he gestured to the captive and several other detained Terran soldiers, won't be around to contradict the official story. Kalen felt sick. The settlement they were targeting was small, peaceful, primarily elders and young ones who maintained ancient gardens. There would be no resistance because there were no warriors there, nothing but slaughter. She looked at Reese and saw the same horror and revulsion on his face. This isn't war, he whispered. It's mass murder. We have to warn them, Kalen said urgently. My people. And we need to alert actual Terran command, Reese added. These mercenaries are going rogue, or someone high up is authorizing atrocities without proper oversight. Their planning was interrupted by movement near the outpost perimeter. Guards were beginning a sweep of the area, probably routine security. We need to move, Reese whispered. They started to retreat, but one of the guards had good instincts, or perhaps advanced sensors. He turned directly toward their position, raising his weapon. Contact, the guard shouted. Forest edge, north sector. What followed was chaos. Weapons fire tore through the vegetation around them as Reese grabbed Kalen and pulled her deeper into the forest, his armor taking at least one hit in the process. They ran, pursuing mercenaries crashing through the forest behind them. Split up. Reese gasped, clutching his side where his armor had been breached. They're after me, Terran traitor. You can get away. No, Kalen said firmly. Together. But the decision was taken out of their hands when they reached a ravine cutting across their path. The gap was too wide to jump normally, but Reese's armor, despite its damage, still had some power in the jump assist function. I could get across, he said quickly, but I can't carry you. Not with this damage. More shouts from behind indicated their pursuers were gaining ground. I know another way, Kalen said, pointing downriver. There's a crossing not far. Too narrow for their vehicles. I can warn my people. Reese nodded, making a quick decision. Go. Warn your settlement. I'll try to reach my actual unit, expose what's happening. He hesitated, then added, if I can't stop them, get your people out of there. Don't try to fight. These aren't regular soldiers with rules of engagement. They'll slaughter everyone. Kalen's skin rippled with urgent patterns. Be careful, Reese of Earth. He managed a tight smile. You too, Kalen of Iridia. With that, he activated his jump assist. Clearing the ravine in a single bound, though, he landed awkwardly on the other side. Kalen turned and ran downstream, toward the crossing, as the pursuing mercenaries reached the ravine behind her. She heard weapons fire and Reese returning fire, drawing their attention away from her. She ran faster, her heart pounding with fear, not for herself, but for Reese and for her people. The crossing was where she remembered, a fallen tree creating a natural bridge. She hurried across it and plunged into the deeper forest beyond, using all her knowledge of the terrain to move as quickly and quietly as possible. She had traveled for perhaps an hour, pushing herself to her limits, when she heard a commotion ahead. Slowing and taking cover, she recognized the sounds of a Xyler search party. Her people were looking for her or others who had gone missing in the raid. She stepped out cautiously, identifying herself with traditional hand gestures and skin patterns. The search party greeted her with relief that quickly turned to alarm when she explained what she had learned. A human told you this? One of the warriors asked skeptically. And you believed it? I saw it with my own eyes, Kalen insisted. Heard it with my own ears. They plan to attack the Moonroot settlement at dawn. Even if this is true, another argued, how do we know this human soldier of yours isn't part of their deception? A way to lure our defenders away from our main village. The debate might have continued, but it was interrupted by the arrival of an elder, Talon, one of the most respected harmonizers in their community. He studied Kalen with ancient, knowing eyes. Show me, he said simply. Kalen approached and extended her hands. The elder took them in his own, and she allowed her skin to ripple with memory patterns, sharing images of what she had seen and heard, emotions she had felt, and, unavoidably, her journey with Reese. When the connection ended, Talon was silent for a long moment. The others waited respectfully for his judgment. The threat is real, he finally said, and the human soldier is not our enemy, at least not in this matter. We must warn Moonroot immediately and prepare our own defenses. But Elder, one of the warriors protested, a single human, showed more honor than we would have expected. Talon cut him off, and perhaps saved many lives by helping Kalen bring this warning. He turned to the group. 2 of you, take our fastest runners to Moonroot. The rest, we return to the village to prepare. Elder, Kalen said hesitantly. The human, Reese, he was injured, drawing their attention away from me. He may have been captured, or worse. Talon considered this. What would you have us do, young harmonizer? If we could search for him, Kalen began, but even as she spoke, she recognized the impossibility of her request. Their resources were limited, and their own people had to come first. Talon laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. The forest remembers those who respect it, he said cryptically. Now come. There is much to do. The return to the Xyler village was swift but tense. As night fell, preparations were made, not for battle, as they had few warriors, but for evacuation if necessary. Messengers confirmed that Moonroot had received the warning and was already moving its vulnerable population to ancient underground shelters. Throughout the night, Kalen found her thoughts returning to Reese. Had he reached his unit? Had he been captured? Was he even still alive? The human who had defied everything she thought she knew about his kind had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Near dawn, as the village hummed with tense activity, a scout rushed in with startling news. Terran ships, the scout reported, moving away from Moonroot, not toward it. And there are signs of battle, Terran against Terran. More reports came in over the next few hours. The mercenaries have been intercepted not by Xyler defenders, but by official Terran military forces. There had been a brief, intense battle resulting in the mercenaries' retreat and the arrest of several of their leaders. How is this possible? One of the village leaders asked in wonder. The Star Eaters fighting each other to protect us? Kalen thought of Reese, his honor, his compassion, his willingness to stand against his own kind when they were wrong. Not all of them are Star Eaters, she said quietly. As the day progressed and the immediate danger passed, Kalen found herself drawn to the edge of the village, looking out toward the forest. The elders had forbidden anyone from venturing out alone while the situation remained uncertain, but she couldn't help feeling that there was something unfinished, something important left undone. She was startled from her thoughts by Elder Talon approaching silently beside her. "Your thoughts are with the human," he observed, not a question, but a statement. Kayla nodded, her skin rippling with concern patterns. "He risked everything to help us, to stop his own people from committing an atrocity." Talon gazed at the forest, ancient eyes seeing more than just trees and undergrowth. "The old stories about the Star Eaters are not entirely wrong," he said after a moment. "Many humans do consume without thought, destroy without remorse. But perhaps, like all great truths, the reality is more complex than our stories captured." "He was different," Kalen said softly. "Yes, as are you." Talon turned to her. "Most Xylar would have fled from a human or fought if cornered. You saw beyond your fear." A commotion at the village perimeter interrupted their conversation. Warriors were gathering, weapons ready but not raised. Voices called for the elders. Talon moved toward the disturbance with Kalen close behind. At the edge of the village stood a small group of Terran soldiers, official military, not mercenaries. Their weapons were holstered, their hands empty and visible. In the center of the group, supported between two others, was a familiar figure. "Reese," Kalen whispered, her skin flaring with recognition patterns so bright that several nearby Xylar stepped back in surprise. The human looked terrible. His armor was missing pieces, his face was bruised, and one arm was bound in a makeshift sling. But he was alive, and his eyes found hers immediately across the clearing. The Terran officer in charge stepped forward cautiously. "We come in peace," she announced in careful common galactic. "This soldier informed us of a planned atrocity against your people. His information allowed us to prevent it and capture those responsible." Elder Talon moved forward as the village's representative. "We thank you for this action of honor." The officer nodded formally. "We are withdrawing all forces from this region as a gesture of good faith. Proper diplomatic channels will be used for any future resource discussions." She glanced at Reese. This soldier insisted on coming here before receiving full medical treatment. He was quite insistent. Reese broke away from his supporters, limping forward a few steps. "Kalen," he called, his voice rough. "Your people, they're safe." Talon gestured to Kalen, giving her permission to approach. She moved forward, stopping a respectful distance from the injured human. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. "Thanks to your warning, no one was harmed." Relief washed over Reese's face. "Good," he said simply. "That's good." He swayed slightly on his feet, clearly at the limit of his endurance. "This human requires healing," Talon announced, surprising everyone. "Bring him to the medicine grove." The Terran officer looked uncertain. "We have medical facilities on our ship." "Your medicine is for human bodies," Talon interrupted gently. "But his spirit has been wounded fighting his own kind. For that, our healing may help." He looked at Reese. "If you consent." Reese looked at Kalen questioningly. She let her skin shift to encouraging patterns, knowing he couldn't understand their specific meaning, but hoping he would sense the intent. "I consent," Reese said, then added to his officer, "I'll be fine, Captain. Consider it." Diplomatic relations. After some hesitation and several communications with their command, the Terran soldiers agreed. They would return in 3 days to check on their comrade, and in the meantime, a temporary no-fly zone would be established around the Xylar territory as a show of respect and reconciliation. As the Terran ship departed, Reese was guided to the Medicine Grove, a sacred space where the most potent healing plants were tended. The physical treatment for his injuries was straightforward enough. Poultices for his wounds, special teas for pain and infection. But the deeper healing Talon had spoken of was something few outsiders had ever experienced. In the center of the grove stood ancient trees whose roots intertwined beneath the soil, creating a network that connected to every other plant in the area. Xyler healers could use this network to guide healing energies and, in rare cases, share the burden of pain or trauma. Your physical wounds will heal with time, Talon explained to Reese as they sat beneath the central tree. But you fought your own kind, made choices that no warrior makes lightly. Such wounds to the spirit can fester if not addressed. Reese looked skeptical but respectful. Where I come from, we just stuff those feelings down until they explode at inconvenient times. It's traditional. Talon actually laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. Perhaps that explains much about human history. He gestured to Kaelin. Our young harmonizer will guide you. She has shared your journey. She can help bridge the gap between our ways and yours. Kaelin sat across from Reese, feeling strangely nervous. The process is simple, she explained. You place your hands on the roots. I place mine nearby. The network of plants connects us, allows understanding to flow. Not mind reading, she added quickly, seeing his expression. Just empathy. Shared healing. Will it hurt? Reese asked, only half joking. Only as much as holding on to pain already does. Talon replied, cryptically before withdrawing to give them privacy. Reese shrugged his good shoulder. After everything else we've been through, what's a little interspecies plant therapy? He placed his hands on the gnarled roots as instructed. Kaelin did the same, closing her eyes and reaching out to the plant network as she had been trained. The connection formed slowly at first. Plants were naturally cautious with unfamiliar beings, but then strengthened as they recognized Kaelin. Through the connection, she felt echoes of Reese's turmoil, the shock of betrayal by his own military, the gut-wrenching choice to stand against them, the fear not for himself, but for people he'd been taught to see as enemies. Beneath it all was a deeper current of doubt about his place in a system that could authorize such atrocities, yet also pride in those fellow soldiers who had stood with him when the truth was revealed. From her side of the connection flowed understanding and a kind of forgiveness, not for any wrong he had done to her. People, but the simple acknowledgement that his choice had been the right one, that his inner conflict was seen and honored. When they finally broke the connection, the grove was bathed in sunset light. Reese's expression was one of wonder and peace. That was, he began, then shook his head, unable to find the right words. Yes, Kaelin agreed, understanding perfectly. The next 3 days passed in a strange, peaceful rhythm. Reese recovered quickly under the Xyler healer's care. Though most villagers remained cautious around him, children were naturally curious, and soon Reese found himself surrounded by young Xyler asking endless questions about Earth, space travel, and why humans had such strange-colored skin that never changed. Kaelin often served as translator and cultural interpreter, stepping in when confusion arose on either side. She found herself seeing her own culture through fresh eyes as she explained concepts she had always taken for granted. She also discovered that Reese's self-deprecating humor and genuine openness broke down barriers far more effectively than any formal diplomatic approach might have. On the third day, as they walked along a ridge overlooking both the village and the landing area where the Terran ship would soon arrive, Reese grew contemplative. What happens now, he asked. I mean, in the big picture, your people, my people. The elders are already in communication with your commanders, Kaelin said. Real communication, not threats and demands. It's a beginning. And us. Reese gestured between them. I'm being reassigned once I'm cleared medically. Different planet, different conflict probably. Kaelin's skin rippled with complex emotions she wasn't sure he could read. I will return to my duties as a harmonizer. But I will also become a voice in the council for a different understanding of humans. Not all star eaters after all. Huh? Reese smiled, but there was sadness in it. Some, perhaps, Kaelin acknowledged. But not you. She hesitated, then added, the plants remember those who respect them. And so do we. The sight of the approaching Terran ship ended their conversation. As they walked down to meet it, Reese stopped suddenly and turned to her. I never thanked you, he said, for not running when you had the chance, for coming back for me with the hexatherm, for trusting me when everything you knew said not to. And I never thank you, Kalen replied, for not being what I feared, for seeing me as a person, not an alien, for sharing your terrible rations. They both laughed, the sound carrying across the valley, a human and a Xyler, finding common ground in the most unexpected of circumstances. As the ship landed and the ramp descended, Reese straightened his borrowed clothes, his armor being beyond repair. I'll come back, he said suddenly. If there's ever peace, if there's ever a chance, I'll come back to see how the plants are doing. They'll remember you, Kalen promised, her skin glowing with patterns of hope and possibility. Reese boarded the ship after a formal farewell with the elders. As the vessel rose into the amber sky of Iridia Prime, Kalen felt Elder Talon join her. A strange thing, the elder mused, how the universe works. You expected death from a star eater, and instead found a bridge between worlds. Do you think it matters? Kalen asked. One human, one Xyler, when armies and governments still circle each other like hexatherms. Talon watched the ship disappear into the clouds. Great changes often begin with small moments of understanding. A seed doesn't look like much either until it grows into a forest. Kalen touched the roots of a nearby tree, feeling its quiet acknowledgement. Perhaps that was enough for now. A seed planted, a story changed. The Star Eaters were still out there, but now she knew they weren't the only kind of human among the stars. And somewhere out there, Reese knew the Xyler were more than just obstacles to resources. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings were the most important part of any story.